Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about plus minus. Where's everybody going? All right, well, I'm going to talk about plus minus anyways. So plus minus gets used to talk about defensive players a lot. It doesn't get talked about with offensive players, which I find odd, because I don't think plus minus is a very good stat to measure who's having a good season, anyways. But it seems to get more recognized for the defensive side of it than the offensive side of it, which to me is odd because both are going to affect it. But it is a stat that's flawed. It is absolutely a stat that's flawed. When the channel started up many, many years ago now, I used it a lot. I don't use it anywhere near as much as I used to. Now I feel like in isolation, if you want to talk about somebody had a rough game and they were a -4, and when I look at that too, I also look to see what the other players on the team had. And I say, okay, this guy was a -4. Everybody else on his team was at worst a -1. He had a rough night. And that's as far as I go with it. Plus minus, of course, is just a measurement of whether the puck goes in your net or their net while you're on the ice. And it's only 5-on-5 or shorthanded. So if you score shorthanded, that'll affect your plus minus. If you're on the ice for shorthanded goals against, that'll affect your plus minus. But power play goals don't matter. One thing I don't understand, and it's in the discourse of the hockey world, I hear it all the time. Most of the games played 5-on-5, so power play stats, you can throw those out. Why? Are they not goals? Are they not? Is it not more impressive that, a team gets, say, 6 minutes of power play time in a game between 4 power plays and they score 3 times? Is that not impressive? And if your answer is not really, then I don't know where to start. But I think plus minus should include the power play. I absolutely do. I think it should. And I think you'd see plus minus numbers change dramatically and people start losing their minds because it would be like, well, no, those are all they're goals. They're goals. I don't understand. It's like when a team wins 4-0 and you go, well, yeah, but all 4 of those goals were on the power play. So technically it was a scoreless draw. Technically it wasn't. So Forsling leads the way in plus minus amongst defensemen from 2018, 2019 until now. Forsling had a remarkable year, a plus 56. Forsling also played on a pretty good team in Florida. And this is part of the issue with plus minus. Not that Forsling didn't have a really good year, but Florida is a pretty stacked team. Stanley Cup finalists last year, President's Trophy winners the year before, and division winners this year. So, very good team. Devon Taves is second on the list back in 2021, 2022. He had a plus 52. And I do remember Abs fans being mad he wasn't a finalist for the Norris Trophy because of his plus minus, which is fine. It's fine. If you view that as being a reason why somebody should be voted, I think there's a lot more factors, and I think that's right near the bottom of the list for me personally. Hampus Lindholm, I keep wanting to say Elias Lindholm, it's Hampus Lindholm, plus 49 last year in Boston, and I wouldn't have tried arguing him for the Norris. Boston, of course, was an absolute wagon during the regular season last year. Cale Makar in 2021-2022, a plus 48. Matt Grzelcyk in Boston last year had a plus 46. Dylan DeMello this year for the Jets, a plus 46. DeMello had a really good defensive season, and if we want to bring in a Rod Langway defensive trophy, it's going to go to somebody like him. That's where, yes, you might be able to make that argument with a Gustav Forsling. Sure. Last year, Brandon Carlo had a plus 44. This shows just how remarkable a season it was for Boston last year that you've got Lindholm, Grzelcyk, and Carlo in the top 10 of a list that's from 2018, 2019 until now. This year, Ekholm had a great year for the Oilers. That's continued into the playoffs, a plus 44. Gustav Forsling in 2021-2022 shows up again with plus 41. Justin Falk in St. Louis in 2021-2022 had a plus 41. And that same season, Goligoski in Minnesota had a plus 41. Ryan Graves in 2019-2020 had a plus 40 for Colorado. Mackenzie Weegar had a plus 40 in Florida, 2021-2022. And again, that's the year they won the President's Trophy. So you'll notice Forsling's only a plus 1 ahead of Weegar. Devon Taves in 2022-2023, a plus 39. Mark Giordano, 2018-2019, at a plus 39 for the Flames. Quinn Hughes this year, a plus 38 for Vancouver. Aaron Ekblad, a plus 38 in 2021-2022 for Florida. So you see you've got Florida, you got Forsling, Weegar, and Ekblad, all separated by a difference of plus 3. And I've argued for a long time, I think Ekblad's a really good defenseman. People will chuckle and guffaw, but I think he is. Ryan McDonough, 2018-2019, of course, that was a great year for Tampa, a plus 38. Pesci, a plus 35 in 2018-2019. Slavin, a plus 35 in 2021-2022. And Chris Tanev, also that same year, had a plus 35. You'll notice Victor Hedman's not on the board. Erik Karlsson's not on the board. A lot of really good defensemen aren't on the board. Yossi isn't on the board either. So then the question becomes, well, why not? In some cases, it's deployment. In some cases, it's the team they're playing for. And there's various reasons for this. I also wanted to talk about Bedard because I keep seeing Bedard's plus minus getting mentioned. So, okie dokie. We can go there. Bedard's plus minus being awful should be pretty self-explanatory. First off, he's 18 years of age to start his career in the National Hockey League. Secondly, he's playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. Thirdly, he's playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. And finally, have you not seen how bad the Blackhawks were this year? So he's a minus 44, tied with Kurashev at minus 44. Kurashev had way more points this year than he would have had if not for Bedard. Korchinski a minus 39, Tyler Johnson a minus 35, Nick Foligno a minus 29, Entwistle and Reichel also minus 29. Chicago had a hard time keeping the puck out of their net, and then they're putting Bedard out there a lot. They're putting him out there in tough situations against the best players from all the other teams. So if you're another team playing against Chicago this year, every time Bedard's on the ice, you throw out your top line, right? So it snowballs from there. And it doesn't count power play goals. It's a flawed statistic from that perspective as well. And I completely ignored Bedard's plus minus. It's just like when a rookie comes in and they struggle on the faceoff circle and you see, oh, this rookie's going to have a hard time. Most rookies struggle in the faceoff circle. That's just standard. If you've got a guy who's been in the NHL for 10 years going in to take a draw against a guy who's a rookie, the guy who's been in the NHL for 10 years has 10 years more experience in all likelihood on that rookie of playing hockey, of taking draws, and probably has a couple of tricks to winning a draw at the NHL level that rookie doesn't. So I pay absolutely zero attention to how bad a rookie is in the faceoff circle because it makes sense, right? So Bedard being a minus 44, when you look at the situation in Chicago, makes total sense. Now, if Bedard had been drafted by Colorado, and if Bedard had a minus 44 playing for the Avs this year, we could have a discussion about why is Bedard a minus 44 when everybody else on his team's a positive. That would be bewildering. But on this Chicago team that was built to tank, this team was not built to win this year. It is not a surprise that Bedard has a minus 44. To me, it's a complete throwaway stat, and I don't think voters are going to take that into consideration for that very reason. So looking at the three finalists for the Norris Trophy, because when you get into the plus minus, that's where everybody talks about, well, this guy should be in there. But again, Quinn Hughes, 82 games, 17 goals, 75 assists, 92 points. His ice time, 24 minutes and 41 seconds. Going back to the Forsling example, he played 22:09 on average this year, which is noteworthy. Like, that's a lot less time over an 82-game schedule. 29 hits for Hughes. He's not a physical defenseman, which, again, I don't think necessarily factors into the Norris. Like, you can have three guys that are close and say, okay, this guy's a little more physical than this one, and maybe that sways your vote. Again, I said towards the end of the year, I probably would have voted for Makar. So that's just, and again, then people are like, oh, Makar's only good when he's with McKinnon. Okie dokie. So give and take, 52 giveaways, 43 takeaways for Quinn Hughes, 38 penalty minutes taken, 32 penalty minutes drawn, meaning that when he's out there, he takes more penalties than he draws for the team, which is not a horrible thing. It really isn't, but it is worthy of note when you're looking at other defensemen. So Cale Makar, 77 games, 21 goals, 69 assists, 90 points, and a plus 15 this season for Colorado. 37 hits. He played 24 minutes and 46 seconds of ice time. So all these guys are right near each other in terms of ice time. In fact, there's a grand total of 8 seconds in difference between the three per game in ice time. 42 giveaways, 70 takeaways for Cale Makar. 70. He's much better at takeaways than giveaways. And so that's part of the reason why when people say, oh, he's only good if he's with, I can tune that out. Because who he's with has nothing to do with his ability to take a puck away from the other team. Really doesn't. 50 penalty minutes drawn instead of 16 penalty minutes taken. Makar is the best in the National Hockey League in that area. So again, while people look at Makar and go, he's just a forward, he's not that great. I think Makar's an excellent defenseman, and I think people underrate him because of his points, which to me seems kind of insane, but I get it. Yossi had a ridiculous second half of the season in 82 games, 23 goals, 62 assists, 85 points, and a plus 12. But look at Nashville's first half of the season. Of course, his plus minus isn't as good. 24 minutes and 38 seconds of ice time per game, 46 hits he threw this year. 60 giveaways, 33 takeaways. That could hurt the number. That could hurt his chances of making it. Is that he did have almost twice as many giveaways as takeaways. And then you can take a further look into that if you want and see like high danger chances, how are they deployed, offensive zone, defensive zone, and who might have been protected. So one thing that is worthy of mentioning with plus minus is matchups. Do you play the toughest matchups in the NHL? And that's a whole other category that gets followed by the analytics crowd. I didn't put it on the board here. I thought about it. I thought, no, because different sites use different measurements. And then you get into the whole, well, don't use that site, use this site. Because even fans can't agree with each other on how to decide on which analytics are right. But in terms of penalty minutes, 45 penalty minutes taken by Yossi, and he drew 35. So a negative 10 for Yossi, negative 6 for Hughes. Makar was a positive 34 if you look at how many he drew compared to how many he took. So again, I think that says a lot, and it means that Makar was driving the play and he was forcing teams to take penalties on him, probably on dangerous plays, whether they were fast breaks, whether it was during a press and teams just desperate trying to get the puck out. Makar was drawing those penalties. Plus minus includes empty net goals. I find this bizarre. I find it bewildering that in the final minute of a game, it's a 6-on-5. That puck gets thrown all the way down the ice into the middle of the net, and you get a minus for it because your team had 6 players on the ice. And not only that, but who's going to be out on the ice during a 6-on-5? Your best defenseman is going to be out there 6-on-5. Your best offensive defenseman is going to be out there, which negatively impacted Karlsson last year. That got talked about a lot, that Erik Karlsson was on the ice for a lot of empty net goals against because San Jose used him a lot in that situation. And we will talk about Karlsson again pretty soon here. But again, it doesn't factor in deployment. It doesn't. There are definitely defensemen and forwards out there who have good or bad plus minuses because of who the coach puts them out there against and where they're playing in the lineup. Maybe who their defense partner is affecting their plus minus and their overall play. Maybe their line mates, that's affecting their plus minus and their overall play. There are too many potential variables to this to look at plus minus and go, that's a stat that absolutely empirically proves my guy's the best. Because he may have a really good plus minus because of his partner, because of the 5-man unit that he's usually out there with. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. I just find it really weird that power play goals don't affect plus minus, but shorthanded goals do, because it's seen as a 5-on-5 stat. But oh wait, there were 3 shorthanded goals scored. Well, if the shorthanded goals are scored, who's going to be out on the ice amongst defensemen for those shorthanded goals? Probably your best offensive-minded defenseman. It doesn't mean it's his fault when that shorthanded goal goes in, but it's going to affect his plus minus in a negative way. Whereas those 35, 40 power play points he has absolutely zero effect on the plus minus, which to me is weird because that is a huge swing in the plus minus department. Where a guy who's, let's say, Yossi a plus 12, let's say 20 of his points are power play points. And I didn't write it all down, but I know that there are some power play points amongst these 3 players. Their plus minuses would be ridiculously high if you included the power play markers. But why not? Like it's that one factor that to me I'm thinking, but why not? Like if an empty net goal affects my plus minus, why shouldn't my team getting a power play goal affect it? I've often said that, power play numbers to me are a little bit skewed too, because how many times do we see a goal get scored 2, 3, maybe 5 seconds after a power play's done, where they get that goal? It's technically 5-on-5. Now it affects your plus minus. But if it had been scored 5 seconds before, that guy's not even back in the play yet. But 5 seconds before, if that goal goes in, it doesn't affect your plus minus. That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it doesn't count as a power play goal. So the announcers for the rest of the game could go, well, they don't have a power play goal yet tonight. And they may have 2 goals they scored 5-on-5 within 5 seconds of a power play ending, where they've got exhausted penalty killers. And again, the guy who just came out of the box, probably not a part of the play yet. So I think the plus minus can be sort of looked at as a stat that you sort of nod and go, that's nice, it's great that guy gets the plus minus, but what are the other stats that we can use to back up how a player is playing? And again, I'm not saying this to insult a player with a good plus minus, but that's why it's not really treated like that's a really good stat to measure a player. And I know there are former players who swear by it. There are announcers that swear by it. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying for me personally, and in what I've seen over the years, plus minus is not a good indicator. So I want to talk about Tomas Hertl, picked up by the Vegas Golden Knights at the trade deadline. Hertl's plus minuses have been awful. He's a minus 73 for his career. And if your answer is going to be, well, that's because he's in San Jose, right. Right. That's kind of my point here. The team you're on will affect your plus minus. He's been a minus 62 over the last 2 seasons with the Sharks, so I did not include the fact that he was a minus 2 in Vegas after the trade, but a minus 62 in 127 games with the Sharks in 2022-2023 and 2023-2024, and the answer will be, but the Sharks are bad. Right. Absolutely. The Sharks are a bad team, so that stat can get kind of thrown out for that reason. And then you look at Erik Karlsson. Last year in San Jose, playing 25 minutes and 36 seconds per game. He was on the ice all the time. He was a minus 26. A lot of that minus 26, empty net goals, because you need a goal late in the game. Karlsson has to go out on the ice. He's the guy. He's your player. You have to go with him. He was the only offensive player they had at times last season. Then he goes to Pittsburgh this year, plays 24 minutes and 16 seconds per game. He has a plus 4. Was Karlsson better this year in Pittsburgh than last year in San Jose? No. The eye test and the overall numbers would tell you no. His offensive numbers dropped off precipitously. He was a much better player last year in San Jose. Karlsson is better when he's the guy. And I think that the problem in San Jose was that when it was split between him and Burns, and you get that sort of too with him and Letang in Pittsburgh, that it doesn't feel like both of them together are as good as they are separately. But that's my opinion on that. But Karlsson's plus minus got better. So by that standard, he had a better season, which I don't think he did, even though his plus minus is 30 points better. And then Sidney Crosby, we can all agree. Okay, most of us can agree. Okay, some of us will agree. Crosby, one of the greatest players in the history of the game. His plus minus over the last 2 years has been plus 15. So by that standard, Crosby hasn't had great years the last couple of years. And the interesting thing, too, is Crosby doesn't have a ton of power play points. That power play hasn't been great, but I don't hear anybody making an argument that Crosby's not one of the greatest of all times and that he's not still one of the best all-around players in the league, to the point where when the Union's asked the best all-around forward in the game, it's pretty universally Sidney Crosby right now. Now that Bergeron's gone, it kind of has to be Crosby, although Sasha Barkov's in that conversation as well. A player who is known to have some really good plus minuses too. So I will throw this in there too. The argument I see a lot about, oh, it's just the guys with the most points now. One-way defensemen don't really get very far in the NHL anymore. There are still defensemen that are all offense, no defense. Absolutely. They don't play that much time in a game. They don't. Coaches won't deploy them. They'll get points, but then suddenly they're in the press box. They're not going to be out there, because the coaches now in the National Hockey League are very defensive focused. And so if a defenseman is not defensively responsible, and if you don't have somebody out there covering for that, he's probably going to get stapled to the bench. Same as forwards. How many times this year have we seen somebody go out and have like a beautiful goal in the first period, and by the end of the third period, they're stapled to the bench. They're done because they made a stupid play that meant that a goal went in at their end. So while the coach is like, yeah, that was a nice goal, but I mean, Tortorella did that, I know, at least a couple of times this year, and I get it. With the way the league is now, if a player doesn't play defense, they don't stay in the league very long. So I'm not saying that Hughes, Makar, and Yossi are as defensively responsible as some of the others, but when you look at the complete game, they're still very good defensively, especially Hughes. Quinn Hughes, when he first joined the NHL, nope, it was a tough watch. There were so many times where he'd make a drop pass to nobody, and the puck would be turned over and going the other way, and I'm like, he could stop those drop passes, that'd be great. Now when he does those drop passes, they're almost always on somebody else's stick, because he's got much better in his rush plays and his zone exits and zone entries. There's a lot that goes into it. I don't know how many of the voters take that into consideration. Like, I don't know how many in the press that have the right for a vote, and I don't get a vote. I don't expect to ever get a vote. But I don't know how many people in the press pay really close attention to all the analytics side of it. But I think more attention is paid now to the finer details of the game than would have been paid by voters, say, in the 80s and 90s. Because we didn't have as much coverage as we do now. Not every game was televised, even back in the 80s. So you kind of had to go by word of mouth and, hey, you guys got to see this guy. And then there'd be a lot of excitement about seeing a player because maybe you hadn't seen him on TV. Maybe you'd just seen like really grainy footage from one of those stationary cams at center ice because it wasn't televised. So you're like, I can't wait to see what this guy can do live. And you don't have that now. All the games have a ton of cameras and a ton of coverage. And so it is a different game now than what it was. And I do think that gets taken into consideration by voters. I think it gives them a better picture than what they would have had all those years ago. And I generally agree, usually, with players that get nominated. It's been a while since I've seen somebody nominated for an award as a finalist and said, I don't know what they're thinking there. And for me, I watch every single game every year, at least as much as I can. If I'm here, if the games are on, I will watch as much as I can, and then try to provide people with what I saw with my own eyeballs. But I also check the analytics websites. I do check all of them as well and go through as many different stats as possible. And it does give you a picture of who's having a pretty darn good year. And it goes well and beyond, I think, what a plus minus number will tell you, because there's just too many factors that can negatively impact it or positively impact it that may very well be out of the control of the player, whose plus minus has taken a dive or maybe had a huge boost. Maybe it has nothing to do with the player. But again, that's me. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support, as always. I will talk to you again soon.